Welcome back to Fast Attack, Slow Release. I'm Nate Brown. Thanks for joining us today. We've got Brayden from our repair department here.
What's up?
You work in our recone part of the repair world.
Yep.
Yeah. How long have you been doing that?
When I started here 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. I did cables, helping out Scott, and then Darren came to me and asked me if I wanted to do recones, and ever since then I've been doing recones, and that was about 7 years ago, so 7 years of experience doing recones. They flew me out to JBL.
Really?
Yeah.
Like they gave you like a whole recone tutorial out there?
Yeah, I did. I'm JBL certified. It was pretty sweet. I've done everything that the typical certified technician does.
That's cool. Like a JBL masterclass.
Masterclass, yeah, it was pretty sweet. It was eye-opening for sure. It was, I was fresh out of high school, about 19 years old, and it was great. It really opened my eyes to how big these companies are. Like, I flew out to JBL, and they just had this massive warehouse.
Yeah.
With all their stuff. It was really, really cool. It was amazing.
Where is that?
Northridge, California.
Oh, I knew that. JBL ships out of California. I knew that.
Yeah.
That's cool. So it's just like that. Is it kind of like that massive, like, 2-city block kind of thing?
It was a warehouse. They were clearing some of the stuff out. They were heading down to Tijuana at the time.
Okay.
And there was one section of their warehouse where you could see hundreds of yards, and it was just pillars like a big Sam's Club or Costco, just empty.
Really? Yeah. Wow. I always wonder what places like that look like on the inside, because I always like,
when you're on Google
I'm always
Maps.
like, how big could a building be? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that's cool. So you kind of got like a master class. Have you ever seen like those like mixed with the masters master class things that people do?
Gotcha.
Like, there's one with Eddie Kramer that people were paying like $12,000 a pop to stay in a house with Eddie Kramer over the weekend and
nice.
Like supposedly like pick up like his mix tips. But I saw basically paying $12,000 to live in a house full of strangers, and I was like, that sounds a little too big, brother.
Yeah, stay at his hostel.
Or yeah.
Welcome to my hostel. You might learn some things.
You might die. Either or. So it seems like there's like a lot of like fabrication and like a craftsman type setting.
Definitely. There's a lot of art to it. Cosmetically, like getting the dome on there, it has to look good. You can't look like a 4-year-old put your speaker together.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you really need to take extra account for, and just make sure that whenever you're doing it, it's got to be spot on perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a really fun job, and it's super artistic.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would be as much when I first got into it, but there's definitely an art to reconing.
And in what way? Like, what makes a recone like your masterpiece, like your work of art? What are you seeing in there that? Because I mean, like for me, like I work down at the sales counter, and when you bring something through, I'm always like, "Damn, that looks professional." But I don't know enough about your process to know, like, oh my God, like look at how good he did that this time, or like.
It's pretty much looking at the glue beads. Pretty much as soon as I'm done with the recone, once I get it tested and there's no, like it sounds like a speaker should, everything's clean and crisp, that's the satisfaction, when the glory of actually getting a piece done.
Yeah.
But it's, sometimes like you get into it and you're just over gluing stuff and you're overthinking it, and all of a sudden your glue is stuck to your fingers and your desk and everything's just, haywire.
Yeah.
But you learn to, when you cut your losses, that doesn't happen very often, but there's some times when you're in really tight spaces trying to get stuff done. It can go bad quickly. And I'd say a unique thing that I learned is when to stop and when to be like, all right, call it quits and redo it and start over. I haven't had to do that too many times, but I've definitely had to do it a time or two.
That's funny because it's just like, that sounds like every other creative process I've ever heard. Like, you start out you overdo it a bunch, and you strip it all back and start again until you've got something. Like when you finally stand back, or you're just like, I did that, or I built that. Like I do that with, like, I built some mantles for my house, like super not a hard thing to do. But when I was done, like I just kind of stood back. I was like, damn, I did that, and they look good, you know?
Yep.
And it seems, you talk to a songwriter, it's the same thing. It's, you know, that's basically Rick Rubin's whole career, actually, is taking things away and stripping it back down until you've got like the right end result that you can just feel that kind of weird sense of ecstasy over, that's cool. So, and I mean, it goes beyond, because you also do stuff like, you cut grill cloth, and like you've recarpeted cabinets for people.
Yep.
So at what point then does a speaker become like unsalvageable? If we can replace so many parts of a speaker, at what point do you just go, hey, listen, man, that thing's wrecked?
Yeah. It kind of depends. So sometimes you get these collectors that'll have really nice old school cabinets that they're like, do whatever means possible to get this up and running again. Like, I love these. Or sometimes they get their speakers inherited and they're like, I really need to get this done. But most of the time, when people typically call it quits is when it's about half the cost of a brand new speaker to 3/4 of the cost.
Okay.
Although, there's some big venues that are just like, I need this done now, like as soon as possible, whatever you can do to get it to me now.
Yeah. Like, I don't have time to wait for a new one to come in. Like, you just got to fix this.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool. So if, I don't know how much of the noise is actually making it through, but we're recording this episode in the store, and we're currently doing some work on our display truss, so there's just the pitter-patter of little worker bees everywhere today. I kind of like it.
It keeps everything unique.
Yes.
And original.
Yeah, there are no edits when you can just hear the background noise just stay consistent the whole way through. That's why I try not to record these in bars. I'm like, I need to edit out all the stupid crap that I say.
Glasses clinking.
Yeah, exactly. Some drunk idiot yelling profanities across the room. So I've had kind of like a burning question since 2009 when I was on my internship. We had a guest engineer at the studio I was working at that was, he was moving on to a new studio for a new project, and he had his own NS10s. And one of our jobs is just like, hey, like, pack up all of Greg's gear and get it ready to move. And when we were packing up his speakers, there was me, there was a runner, then there was his like 2 assistant engineers that just did everything, like just knew how he wanted everything, all the, like, he was just like, they were just their right hand people. And we spent about an hour debating on how the NS10s should lay in the case, because none of us wanted to be the person that broke this high-powered client's NS10s.
Yeah.
Is there like a good way to store a speaker when you're transporting it like that?
All right. I would say whatever, like, lay it probably... So an NS10, that's a studio monitor, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to have knobs and stuff on the back. I would want to put
it's a passive one. So it's... Oh,
it's passive.
Yeah, it's a passive speaker. It's the original, like, white paper cone
All right.
bookshelf thing.
Yeah,
so
exactly, yep.
The main thing that we were discussing was, like, if we lay it on the front, is that going to, like, stretch the voice coil and everything with the weight? If we lay it on its side, like, that's what we were mostly worried about, like the voice coil and how laying it down might affect it, if at all.
So if you think about it, like, you have big line arrays at major concerts, and the speakers are constantly at a 90-degree angle from flat. I haven't seen any issues with setting a speaker on its side, but when you're traveling with it, like throwing speakers in the back of a truck or whatever, I wouldn't want to throw them on their feet. I would probably put them either on their side or if they have a grill, face first on the grill. But then you run into, if you're like going fast and stopping, you might want to throw that on a packing blanket, just so it's not going to scratch anything up.
Yeah. So your concern is more about them like actually moving around in the van or whatever, and
Yeah.
less about like if you just drop that thing into a custom molded case, like you don't think it really
Yeah,
matters which side
road
it goes.
case, you're set. Like
Okay.
we've had ours in road cases for years, and
Okay.
it's very rare that I see. I've never seen a shifted pull from performance audio, and that's typically what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that requires like a really hard drop, or
Okay.
just I've seen excessive power shift a pull.
Uh-huh.
Um,
That makes sense.
but yeah, it's typically like if somebody has. I've seen an 8x10 bass cabinet that has wheels on the back and it's really heavy, and they just throw it up on the stage.
Uh-huh.
I've seen a couple of those pulls shift just because they're kind of brutal with their equipment.
Freaking roadies.
Roadies, man, gotta
Yeah.
watch out.
Well, cool. You just put to get to rest a 10-year like we spent an hour debating it, and we're like, should we call him? We're like, if we call Greg, we're all fired. We just need to and we agonize. I mean, we were all, I mean, not all of us. A couple of us were super fresh out of school and overthinking everything. And then because we were freaking out, they started freaking out. Like, well, I don't know now either. So I don't even remember what we decided to do, but I don't think we broke his speakers. So
You haven't heard back from him. That's good.
yeah, I don't think he even remembers I exist. He was the kind of guy like he was a pretty famous audio engineer, and he didn't have time for people he didn't care about. So it
Yeah.
was like if you were an intern there like me, like you'd be like, "Hey, man." And you just didn't even register to him. He just
Yeah.
kept walking. Like, I don't
Moving
know
on.
if he was like deliberately ignoring me or if like legitimately he just hadn't programmed his brain to care about me enough to respond. So you take in like God knows how many repairs a day. It seems like we're always sending something up to you.
Yeah, definitely.
And what tends to be kind of like some of the main causes for like a lot of what we see is like blown speakers that
Right.
usually when a speaker's blown, it's largely user error in some way. You know,
90% of the time it's user error.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, is there usually like a common theme within that user error where it's like, man, if people would stop doing this, you know, I'd be out of a job.
Definitely. Well, there's always speakers that need refoams or random things go on here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say the biggest thing that people do is they'll overpower their speaker, they'll underpower their speaker. Not a lot of people, like when I bring this to their attention, not a lot of people know that it's as dangerous to overpower your speaker. Sorry, it's as dangerous to underpower your speaker than it is to overpower your speaker.
Mm-hmm.
What'll happen is not enough power gets sent to your voice coil and it starts to heat up.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to see a certain amount of power for whatever it's rated for. And once it heats up, the glue starts to melt and it creates bubbles within the voice coil, and it will rub inside the gap and it'll sound kind of like a kazoo.
Okay. Yeah, because that's when the voice coil starts to kind of fuse a bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So underpowering, like, you know, you've got your speaker ratings of, you know, you've got your root mean square, RMS, and you've got continuous, and then you've got your peak.
Right.
So how far below that continuous, which is the middle number, like how far below, and that's the kind of like that's standard operating draw. How far below that do you see that typically that the underpowering starts to become an issue?
If you go below, so there'll be the minimum amount of watts you want to throw at your speaker. Then you have program power, which is double.
Mm-hmm.
And then from program power, you have peak power. So your amplifier is rated at, let's say, 300 watts per channel. And you have a 300 watt speaker that is perfect for it. That's what it was tested for.
Sure.
So at peaks, it's going to see potentially up to 1200 watts. So it'd be 300 watts would be your minimum amount of power. Program power would be 600 watts. Peak power would be 1200. RMS is root mean square, which is almost, not exactly, but about 3/4 of the peak power.
Okay.
So you'll want to stay right around the minimum amount of watts in program power. You don't want to go over program power because it's rated for that. So when it peaks out, your amplifier could potentially be peaking it out at like 1600 watts if it's a little bit higher powered amp than 300 watts.
Okay. So how much headroom should people be shooting for then? Wattage wise, because you want a little bit of headroom,
yes.
at least, right?
Yeah, I would say so it would be 300 to 600 watts in the reference we were talking about. I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to throw 600 watts at that speaker with that being program power. I would want to I would say the highest watts you'd want to put at it would probably be 500 watts.
Okay. Okay, cool.
So
and we're talking driver specific, not a whole cabinet, right? Yeah. So like the wattage ratings on a cabinet are going to be a little bit different than just like the individual wattage rating on a driver.
Right. And your high frequencies, the lowest you'll see on pro model stuff would be about 25 watts. And then your highest, like the JBL 2447, is right around 150 watts.
Okay.
So high frequency drivers don't really need that much power. And I do see a lot of people throwing a lot of power at high frequency drivers.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, that's a good segue into something else I wanted to talk to you about. We see a lot of people come in that have blown their high frequency driver specifically, which to me, I'm always like, how did you do that?
Yeah, that would really hurt to be in the crowd.
Yeah, exactly. And then they'll come in and they're just like, I need a new tweeter. And it's like, well, how many watts do you need? They're like, I don't know. I just want a tweeter.
Right.
Okay, but you know, like if we throw a 150 watt tweeter into a 200 watt, like a 300 watt enclosure that's got like a 200 watt or 250 watt driver in it.
Right. Your high frequency is going to be way overpowering that low frequency.
Yeah. So is there kind of like a relationship between the two?
Yes, definitely there is. If you were to swap it out, I would try my best to keep the same ohms and keep the same watts if you know that. I would definitely do that. I would keep the same ohms and same watts if you know.
Of course.
But when it comes to swapping out high frequency drivers, there's lots of different manufacturers that'll throw a different thread on their threaded horns. And the same thing with the bolt configurations if it's a bolt-on high frequency. Yeah, you'll see a lot of different configurations. So I'd say the hardest thing would probably be, after you match the ohms and the watts, is to make sure that the thread will work on your horn.
Okay, yeah, and that's one that people don't often consider. Like, we get caught up in like, well, what's the resistance? What's the wattage rating? And a lot of times you don't really stop to think like, will this even fit in the cabinet, until you send it home and it comes back a day later and they're like, cool, I didn't have any high frequencies for my show. So as far as like overall cabinet wattage, is there a relationship between that and the wattage of the tweeter that you typically drop in? Like, is it like, you know, if you've got like a 300 watt cabinet, should be shooting for about 10% of that should go to the high frequency driver, or is there that kind of relationship, or no?
To be completely honest with you, I don't know.
Okay.
But there definitely is, like they design cabinets. However big they are, they'll design the woofer to have a certain resonance, so that way the cabinet will sound the way it does. So if you swap out, let's say, a low frequency driver, there's a good chance if you have the original next to one that has a aftermarket that you threw in there, you will definitely be able to hear a difference.
Right, because the original woofer is kind of tuned for the natural resonance of the cabinet. Yeah, so I mean, everything kind of has. This is a fun thing. I remember learning about this in like a physics class and being like, that's the coolest thing ever. Like everything having its own resonant frequency, right?
Yep.
And that's, you know, when you get things that vibrate too well at their own resonant frequency, you get things like the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, you know, that was like a famous, yeah, exactly. That was like a famous, like, we built this bridge to resonate at the exactly wrong frequency for that gulch, and this is what happened, you know?
Yep.
And this is what, like, people will come in with like their own like custom built cabinets and like, what driver should I throw in this? It's like, well, how much math did you do? There's like a lot of math involved.
Oh yeah, hats off to those people that are designing these speakers, because they're great. Like the EAW LA215, that's probably one of my favorite sounding speakers.
Yeah.
It's not the highest of It's not the like the most expensive speaker you can get, but it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely not one close to one of the cheapest. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
they. And to be honest with you, I believe when I pulled out the low frequency, it was a Eminence low frequency.
Really?
Yeah, more and more I'm seeing Eminence all over the market, like, and I think they do an amazing job with their work.
Yeah, that's we're an Eminence dealer here. We stock a lot of Eminence, and I hear you recommend the Eminence speaker just about any time we call you down to help us or help a customer spec a speaker. It seems like you're pretty much always bringing up an Eminence replacement driver.
Yeah,
So.
that's my mainly go-to. There's not any other manufacturer that I know in the United States
Mm-hmm.
that builds it here and sells it here, and they stand behind their product. Like they have a 7-year warranty
Cool.
on all their drivers. I believe it's 7, if not 5, but I'm pretty sure it's a 7-year warranty. But all their stuff is top notch.
Right on. I've seen more and more guitar cabinets throwing Eminence drivers in them as well. That's kind of my first exposure to them, was seeing guitar cabinets with Eminence drivers in them.
Yeah, the Legend series, the Patriot series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always really dug them. But so, kind of going back to that, then, like, are these like the EAW boxes and stuff? Are the Eminence drivers that they drop in them? Are they just like a run of the mill like Eminence Kappa Pro or whatever? Are they built specifically for the EAW
Right.
boxes?
Yep. So I've actually called Eminence on this. I'd say like 3 years ago, and asked them. I was like, hey, I see Eminence all over this speaker, like just their stickers and stuff. And I was like, I can give you all the information that I have on the speaker. Would you be able to give me a replacement that you guys sell? And they said, no, it's an OEM piece that they make for whatever specific manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, but I'm pretty sure that the ones that they do make, you can probably find a really close Eminence replacement.
Sure. Yeah, they're like, well, that exact part number is allocated for EAW, but, we've got this one that's one number different that you'll find is strikingly similar in rep speak. I got you. So I want to go back to something you'd mentioned a little bit earlier, which was we were talking about when is a speaker a lost cause, and you mentioned like restoring speakers.
Right, yep.
I've seen a lot of really cool old original mid-century like console record players and stuff kind of coming through lately. Have you noticed like an uptick in that?
It kind of comes in waves. I'd say everything that I see comes in waves.
Yeah. It's kind of weird how that works.
Yeah, it's slowly going on the far side of seeing the older stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Although, yeah, there has been someone dropped off some DBX things. It's a couple weeks ago, but there's nothing I could really do with them. The whole cabinet was a lost cause. It looks really nice.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know DBX made speakers. It was
I didn't either.
pretty surprising. But yeah, it was those old school, floor standing speakers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with the wood grain to it. They look really nice, but
it's always kind of like a pour one out when you can't restore an old speaker. I noticed it was right before I left on leave for a minute, but Telefunken too had at some point like a home hi-fi division, and somebody brought that in. It was a whole console player and just like littered with tubes on the inside.
Yep, we still have that upstairs.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I mean, it's people think of us as like a pro audio shop, but I mean, as far as like a speaker repair goes, for you, as long as you can get the parts, you don't really care.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really like to turn speakers down. Like there is some stuff, like some of the newer, I get calls all the time about sound bars or Bluetooth speakers that are just like your backpack speaker.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't do those, but fortunately, we're not a consumer shop.
Yeah.
Like it really sucks that there's no place to repair those besides shipping them back, and they're probably just going to give you another refurbished.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, all the time I'll get calls for Bluetooth stuff, and I'm like, I'm really sorry, but there's nothing we can do with that.
It's kind of sad the throwaway culture that we see kind of come through now. I mean, with the pro audio stuff, it's a lot less, but yeah, we see that consumer stuff come in, and they're not built to be repaired at all. It seems it's just cheaper for them to to just kind of make an all-in-one thing that you can never pull
Yep.
apart and, just throw it away and make it a sea turtle's problem,
Yeah, it's kind of the consumer market. They'll want you to buy a new entire system if one speaker goes out.
Mm-hmm. Planned obsolescence.
Yes.
Yeah, it's something that we try to avoid here. And I mean, we've dropped entire lines just because we're like, these aren't easy to repair. And,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the cool things about working for a small shop and just, small shops in general is you do get that more service-minded and kind of like that conscious, like, how are our customers actually going to feel about this in a year instead of like, who's going to buy it right now? It's how are we going to be able to help them in a year or, 5, hopefully not in just a year, but, when they come back 5 years, is this something we're going to be able to fix? And we've dropped entire vendors because when they come back, it's just like, well, sorry, I know we said we were going to cover it, but we're really not,
Yeah. There's some manufacturers that don't cover or they have no service on their parts or anything like that. So when we try and get them repaired, it's like 6 months before we hear back, and then they'll say, no, that's an obsolete piece. Or there's some companies that when you call, you just get sent into a queue for about a half hour, and finally you get through and you get pretty upset. You're like, I really need to get this piece. And they're like, yeah, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah. It's rough. I mean, and that illustrates something that, a lot of times somebody will come in with a repair like, I need it now. I need it yesterday or what have you. And, we usually quote people, 3 weeks, and it's not for lack of trying to fix your gear more quickly, but it's because, I don't want to say every repair that comes through, but most repairs require us hunting down a part. And how much time on the phone does that take? How many queues, how many stupid phone tree loops do you have to get stuck in before you can actually find that part? And it's
exactly. Yeah. It's kind of funny, like, now that you mention that, because when I do see speakers, like, I kind of put a time limit on my head with how long it's going to take to actually physically get everything I need to get it repaired.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's some manufacturers I see and I scratch my head and I'm like, all right, let's eat lunch while I call these companies.
Yeah. It's a standing lunch, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I feel like the first manufacturer that just pivots to like a text message based customer service is going to win over every millennial that ever walked the earth, because like I can't remember whatever option 1 was on a phone tree by the time I get to option 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And usually when I call in and I get a phone tree, I'm like, I don't even know what option I need yet. And I've only got so many fingers that I can keep track of those little option things on. Whoever's listening out there, if you develop a text-based customer service platform, you've won my support for life. I don't care like if you like what your business model is, if it's like coats made out of puppies. If I can text you for customer service, you got me.
Nice. Yeah, I know about that.
Right. I mean, maybe don't make coats out of puppies. That was a lie. I'll still boycott you, but it's the thought that counts.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, you always hear about people like, not always, every now and then you hear about someone that goes to a garage sale and buys some weird framed picture, and behind it is like a Rembrandt or a copy of the Declaration of Independence or whatever. Or in my case, when I was a little kid, my mom and I got into our family station wagon one day and she opened the glove box and there was a nest of brand new baby mice. Is there like, do you ever come across just like, you open up a cabinet and you're like, how did that get in there?
Yeah. All the time. I'd say the weirdest things that I've seen would probably be lighters. I've seen pool chalk, or for a pool cue, some chalk.
Oh, uh-huh.
There was a little toy soldier, one of those green toy soldiers.
Nice.
I've seen balls and like some of those old home stuff.
Like an old ping pong ball, or?
No, like a little kid ball.
Really?
Like you put it in that cylinder and you put the shapes in there. They just had the ball that was in there.
And just in like an entirely sealed speaker cabinet.
Yeah, they just found the porthole and shoved the ball in the hole. I've seen, usually it's spiders or dead insects.
Sure.
that I open
That
up.
would make sense.
But yeah, nothing like a Picasso or Rembrandt. I
Or a
wish.
nest of baby mice.
Well, there was one time we got some speakers from. It was a repair. I think it was a barn that the speakers came out of.
Oh, really?
There was all sort of chicken dumps all over it. So yeah,
Nice.
I had to wear gloves and shower right after work that day for sure.
Wear a respirator.
I think I did. Yeah, it was pretty nasty.
You should. That's how you get SARS or anthrax or something.
Mad chicken disease.
Mad chicken disease. That's true. Oh, man, that's scary. I never thought about mad chicken disease.
Yeah, everyone running around with their head cut off.
Terrifying. Everyone's plucking it. Not plucking. What am I trying to say? Never mind. Ignore me. Well, this has been very educational. I do want to say, when I was like researching topics to talk to you about, I forgot that we'd made like a time-lapse video of you doing a recone from start to finish on a speaker.
Yeah, I think Ivan recorded me doing that a while ago. I was listening to some metal headbanging. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, you are the resident heavy metal aficionado of performance audio, I believe.
I've been here for a while, but I will say those Backbeats boys, they know some really good metal bands.
They know some obscure stuff. We'll have to get one of them on here.
I would definitely talk to Todd. He has a wide variety of music that he listens to. It's really good.
Nice. Yeah, we'll check in with Todd here soon. Todd's in our web department now. He's one of my favorite human beings. He's a genuinely awesome guy. So we'll hopefully have Todd on here soon. Well, cool, man. I appreciate the education today, and I appreciate you laying my ages-old, still keeps me up sometimes question of apparently absolute futility. So,
cool. You can rest easy tonight.
Yeah, I will. So we'll post a link to the YouTube video online. It is definitely not a heavy metal song playing. Like they put like a Foo Fighters song over it, and I'm like,
Perfect.
This is a weird time lapse song. I'm into it.
Yeah,
So if you're in the mood to both listen to Foo Fighters and watch just a downright mesmerizing time lapse, we'll post a link to that in the show notes. We'll post a link to just our repair page in general, so people know how to get in touch with you. And anybody with any questions can always feel free to email us. You can get me Nate@performanceaudio.com.
Sweet.
Thanks for sitting down and talking to me, man.
Of course.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Nate.